and then I'm going to start the webinar. All right, hello everybody. For everybody that is that are starting to join us, bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to push us live to Facebook. All right, well, the Facebook wasn't working, so we're just going to go through with Zoom today. So welcome everybody. Oh wow, we have 135 online already, ready to watch. So today we have David Yost here doing our virtual plant clinic, talking about perennials today. As normal, this is a Zoom webinar, so if anybody has any questions, you can type them in the chat. Or you can also type them in the question and answer functions at the bottom of your screen. If any of the questions that you ask today don't get answered, you can always email myself. My name is Daniel Kapp. You can email me through our website, or you can also email Sally Burrows at sburrows@mgcmail.com. Sally couldn't be with us today, so I'm filling in for hosting duties again. I think that's about it. So I'm gonna, without any further ado, I'm gonna send it over to David.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for joining me today. Again, we've been doing these, we call virtual plant clinics, I think since January, having a real good time, and I'm glad to see everybody joining us today. So I thought we had talked a little bit about annuals a couple of weeks ago, and at this point, I thought I'd like to take a little time today to talk about perennials. Of course, perennials, everybody loves these because it's the whole idea of, hey, I can go out, I can buy a plant, put it in the ground, and expect that to come back year after year. And that is what a perennial does for us. But I also like to borrow a phrase from a horticulturist at the Smithsonian, Janet Draper. I was attending one of her classes, and she made a really good point saying, hey, perennials are not the same thing as perpetual. So I was so glad to hear her say that, because I know in my own experience, and I plant these and I expect them to be there year after year after year. And generally that's true, but not true with all of them. Some perennials might be more short-lived, like I found I have verbena in my garden, and it may or may not come through the winter as an example, whereas like, peony you might be passing down from your grandmother's garden. So, perennials, like I said, everybody wants them because the idea is that they'll be there, they'll continue to expand, they'll continue to grow. So we get more in return for our investment. And like I said, well, that's generally true. You're always editing, changing, and making things go on from there. The thing is, recognizing, we talked about annuals, how valuable they were, because the annuals gave us just this continuous flowering. They're blooming for us all the way from late March, April, May, June, July. They're just that continuous flower color that goes on, whereas perennials generally give us a season of bloom. That flowering season might last 1, 2, maybe 4 weeks if you're really fortunate for some long flowering ones. And so that's sort of the trade-off that we have, and why I keep saying we have to have a little bit of everything in the garden. But what I want to do today is I'm really not talking about perennial flowers because I said the flowers, well, I love them and they're gorgeous and they're absolutely one of the main reasons to put them in our garden. That's a fleeting quality. And I want to invite you to really look at the plant in terms of its color, its texture, its form, its shape, and look at all those attributes. And that's what our focus is on today. So I'm going to kick this off with a video. I had gone out to ask Linda Brining, who works in our perennial section, an extremely talented designer, way better than I ever will hope to be, to kind of give us a little tour and a rundown of perennials and how we can combine them, use them to great effect in our gardens. So here we'll go with Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda. Thanks for joining me here today. Have you ever wondered what makes a fabulous container garden? I have the same question, and I was able to answer that for myself when I was in England, walking the streets looking at their fabulous window boxes. Some I liked, some were okay, and some were absolutely outstanding. And my goal was to find out what made that outstanding window box. That's the secret I want to share with you today. Hint, it's not the flowers. It's what makes the backbone of those container gardens, makes them absolutely fabulous in every instance. Come on, I'll show you my color palette. And here we have our color palette. We've got silvers, purples, reddish tones, golds, greens, and some burgundies in here. This is what we have to work with to make fabulous and dynamic containers. So let's get started and see what we do. We've got the salvia here that has a little bit of purple in the stem, which plays fabulously with the purples of this heuchera. Also, what would play great with that heuchera is this Japanese painted fern because of the veining that it has that is a nice little purple. What also goes well and makes this a great container is the lamium, that the dynamic trio that we have here is great for a shade garden. This will also have a purple flower that goes with it. What's really fun to use with this one, because it has a heart shape, is to go ahead and repeat that shape with the Bernera that also has a gorgeous heart shape, but is a larger size. So this is going to be more of a bold texture, where this is going to be more of a spilling texture, a trailing texture. And we have our carex here, which will give you some nice fill and cascade coming down. It'll spill over the edge of a container, probably down about a foot, so it really does fill in nicely. And it comes in the white greens, the lime greens, different shades of green. They have so many of them, but they are great for shade gardens and fabulous for containers or even in the landscape. Wonderful plants. Then we have our heucheras. How can we live without our heucheras? We have so many of them, probably as color to fit any kind of garden situation you want. We've seen our purple. We've got the red tones here that have kind of a raspberry back on this one. We've got the champagne here that has kind of a silvery hue over the gold. And what's really fun about this particular one is you've got this gorgeous pink lining underneath. And when the light hits it just right, you'll pick up the colors from the light, the shadow from underneath will change the color of the whole leaf and give you an entirely new color for the plant during that particular time of day. We've got the heucherella. Now this little guy, this is a cross between the heucheras and the tyrella, and it gets the markings here from the tyrella. I really like to use the markings, the color of the markings, to indicate what colors I'm going to use for the container, such as this begonia has got the back red, the back to the leaf. I might match these two together because they both have that burgundy tone in them. The begonia here, the fun part about this is this gorgeous leaf veining on the back side. You don't always see it, but it just kind of flirts with you when the wind picks it up. And if you can see it as I'm turning it around, how it just changes the color of the plant as you're seeing it. And last but not least is the part that brings the light to the container. I call this particular one my drama queen. This is the creeping Jenny. She's going to trail down about 3 feet, bring a lot of light to the containers, and is really a fabulous plant to use. So now let's see how we're going to use these in our containers. This container was started in March, and the reason I selected this hellebore is I had very few plants to choose from that time, especially plants that were going to be in bloom, and this one is in fabulous bloom at that time. It was, and you can see the blooms are still hanging on here, but it has this really nice mottled foliage to it, which is going to be a great backdrop for the whole container as the season progresses. And it's situated in the back of the container because I knew the height that it was going to get. Then to bring us into the summer season, I added the acanthus, which has got this dynamic oak leaf foliage that has the green and the white, one of the few plants that actually can come up with a white leaf. This is going to put up a beautiful panicle of soft peach flowers that is just stunning. And then as the fill for it, we put in this lamium, which has these nice little heart-shaped leaves, and it just is going to trail and fill in all the empty places. And I knew at the time that it was going to be blooming in these purple tones, and that's why I went and chose a purple heuchera to put with it, so that the accent and the plant tones would be really stunning. And then to bring it further into summer, we added a little hosta church mouse, and then this is the annual begonia that's going to take it through the summer with a little bit of a splash. So this is a really a true all-season plant, because this absolutely will remain evergreen even when everything else goes dormant. How about if we move on to our next container? This container is featuring both flowers and foliage. Your bracts here don't truly look like flowers, but this is indeed the flower of this plant. It ages to this nice merlot color and offers a gorgeous color combination with the rest of it. As it ages, you'll see we get the leaves in here that are coming up, and they've got the nice burgundy and the green in them. And by the end of the season, most of the plant, this will be a foxtail leaf that's probably up as high as the blooms are now, and it will be the predominant portion of the plant, the container, when we are in there. Now I've accented that with this rumex that has a swordtail leaf with a gorgeous burgundy veining in there. Has a blossom to it, but the blossom is not stunning, and sometimes I even remove it. Shh, I won't say anything. To brighten it, we've added the pulmonium. This is a Brise Anjou. It gets a blue flower, but we put it in here because of the brightness of the foliage. Really, really beautiful variegation in here. This ajuga, this is one of our newer ones. This is in the Fine Feathered Friends series. Again, to add some complement cascading down, we have our Carex, probably in the Carex Evergold. There's so many that it's difficult to tell them apart, but they will cascade down and give you a lot of texture coming over the edge. And not to ignore the flowers here. This is a Geum Temple Rose, selected because the flowers are complementing the Merlot in here so nicely. But these have been deadheaded quite a bit, and even though we're not focusing on flowers, I just wanted to let you know which this particular flower was. This container is going to be an all-season container because the Carex is evergreen, the Ajugas very likely are evergreen, and your Euphorbia is going to be evergreen. So they will be with us during the winter, and the rest of them will go dormant, and we'll see them again in the spring. This is a very simple container. It has 3 plants, 2 colors, but a lot of motion. The personality comes from the color of the foliage, this heucherella, picking up with the color of the container. Now, it also then is blended with this lime green. So we pick up the lime green with this Mexican feathergrass, and this plant has beautiful feathers when it's in plume. The wind will catch it and you'll get a lot of movement out of it. And then it's again complemented by the length of your creeping Jenny down here, which, because of the lime green on it, really does a beautiful job finishing off the tone of the plant. And this is one of my favorite containers. Now, this little gem was selected because of the color of the container. I love the blue on it, and so to start out, I selected plants that would complement that blue. So this is a little star juniper and a little sedum hispanicum. And I love to complement the blues with a raspberry tone. So I chose this little sedum that is a bumbleberry series because it has the raspberry tones in it. This particular little one here happens to be a trailing raspberry. It will take off for you if in the garden, so beware. Then to pull out these warm tones again, we added hen and chicks, and it was embellished with different sedums and Dellis worm. And then we added some of the little veronica here in the bright tones to offer a highlight. And when this was blooming, this is a little Louisia. It had the most gorgeous blooms on it that had little pedestals with little star-shaped flowers on it. So it was the belle of the ball when it was in bloom. But I just love working with the different shades and interesting colors of containers. You start with that to make your garden design, and you should come up with some real winners. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you've gained some insight on how to add that wow factor to your garden. Until next time, may the blessings of your garden be abundant.
Well, that was absolutely fabulous. And what's so nice, again, is all that beautiful color. Again, that's just with foliage. Now, Linda went through a lot of different plants there, and we just filmed that yesterday. And so she's compiling a list with all the plant names if you're trying to keep track of that. We hope to have that available tomorrow, so we'll be able to email that to you if you wanted to get more information on particular varieties of plants that she was showing. Also, I feel like I have to say, not everything that you see today is going to be available. That's because some of these pots and containers she's working with may have started back in March, and she's continued to update them throughout the seasons and everything. So plant availability changes from one day to the next, one week to the next. So always, if there's something you really have your heart set on, just call us ahead of time and check to be sure that it's absolutely that it is here. So what I'll be doing is a little bit later in the show, I will be taking your questions. So feel free to submit any questions that you have. But before we jump into that, I want to show just a couple examples of how some of this can be applied to your landscape. Because while Linda was working with pots and containers, everything that she was showing also applies in your home garden. So here's just a couple plants, I'm not going into extensive like Linda just showed us, but a couple plants that I think are sort of a must-have in almost everybody's landscape. Now back here, this taller plant with this very feathery fern-like foliage, that's the Amsonia hubrecti. That's an old plant. It's probably been there in my garden for well over 10 years. And you can see how much size that has gotten onto it. It flowers in April, but the flowers in there, probably late April, are kind of a soft, real soft, pale blue color, really more of a white, but it's nice. The bumblebees come and go after it. But again, the main reason I have it is because it has this stature and this has this permanence, and it has that beautiful fern-like frondy kind of foliage on it. And in front of it, sedum. The sedum, which has also been there probably for a good 10 years or more. So these are rock solid, sturdy perennials. And again, playing with that textural contrast. Now, the reason I put that in here was I wanted to say a thing or two about how you can prune perennials. We usually talk about pruning in terms of trees and shrubs, but in this small townhouse garden area, what can happen is that Amsonia can get so big. I mean, here we are in June, it can eventually overtake the larger part of that garden. And the sedum is an example of one of those plants that when it does bloom in late summer, oftentimes it wants to flop over. So one of the things that we can do, this is my before picture, this is my after picture. Just last night in the evening, I went out and you could see I just literally pruned the top off of the Amsonia. Now again, it was prettier before. I like that loose feathery texture, but I was thinking it's kind of like when you're cleaning your house. Sometimes you got to make a mess to clean things up. And you can see what I did here, also pruned back the sedum a bit. Now, you don't have to do this. I'm not trying to put this out as a recommendation. I'm just putting it out there so that you understand if you have tall plants, and this can be some of the asters, like, things, Joe Pye weed, I'll do this. can't tell, but this is a little summer phlox over there. Sometimes I'll prune that back a little bit to keep it short and stocky. Now, if you prune them, and here we go, this just sometimes people are asking, but what I was saying, if you prune them, you will delay the flowering a little bit on some of your summer bloomers, and the flowers are actually smaller in size, but we do this to keep the plant stocky. What I use is just these hedge clippers, these little small hedge trimmers have worked great for me. I use that in trimming ground covers and perennials and things. And I put that little pile of debris, just to give you an idea of how much I did take out of the plant, which again, some years I trim heavier, some years lighter. I'm always experimenting. I just went with kind of a light haircut this year. And then I'm trying to show, kind of fast forwarding through the process, this would be what I look forward to in the fall. So in the background, again, that's the Amsonia, which is grown predominantly for the foliage, because in addition to that nice feather-like foliage is in the fall, it just really lights up this beautiful golden color. And then in the foreground is I always call chrysanthemum, but I guess they changed it to Dendranthema or Dendranthema. But we can still call it chrysanthemum between you and me. It's, again, this late summer fall bloomer that also gets pruned back about this time of year. Maybe I'll do it in another couple of weeks to keep it manageable and its size down there. So if you have plants in your perennial garden that have this kind of habit, now is a good time to get out there and trim them. This is that same sedum plant, flowering usually more towards an August time period, August going in September. And what you'll notice by pruning it, the flowers are smaller, smaller clusters, but it keeps the plant dense, it keeps it full, and it prevents that from flopping over. Just kind of going through another example, I think, of using contrasting textures, because again, everything Linda was doing in container, we do this in our gardens, but maybe just on a little bit larger scale. So what I have here is in the, right through the middle of the picture, this is the Hacanacola. That's that shade-tolerant grass. It comes in all different kinds of colors and patterns. You go from green to solid yellow. This is a variegated form. Some of them have a white coloration in there. But really it gives this beautiful drooping textural form. And because I'm primarily in a shade garden, I use these yellows and chartreuse colors because really want to brighten things up. And in the foreground is the Epimedium. So again, that's grown as a dense ground cover. The flowers come up in early spring and maybe looks really interesting for a period of about 10 days. But again, it's the foliage that really draws me to this plant and serves us so well, and then plays off the fine texture grass up in there. So these are just a few things that you might want to try, and it is a great way to brighten up a shade garden. Another favorite that kind of goes along in this same school of thought, same kind of context, this is that Aralia cordata, the Sun King, with this big coarse textured leaf. And I got that kind of sandwiched in. You can't see it. There's a daylily behind it with kind of fine type of grassy leaves on. And the foreground is, again, that Hacanacola. So we're still doing the same thing and trying to play color pickups, textural contrasts, putting this to work in a garden type of setting. So again, whether it's in a garden or a container, these are just great ways to play with perennials, and it just goes on forever. So like I said, just no end to how all that goes. Excellent. So before we go on to our next topic, any questions coming in, Danny?
Definitely, definitely. So we had a couple people asking about the containers that the perennials are in. They're concerned about overwintering, and if the containers need to come in during the winter, or if there are some good frost-proof containers that you'd recommend.
So one thing that we found is, well, some of those containers, that one big one's got a crack right down the back side of it, so we listed not for sale because it does happen out there. But the thing that we really want to avoid is having it sit on bare ground. If we put them up, if you can elevate them just a little bit on pot feet, or sometimes a gravel bed or something, that helps tremendously in preventing the cracks and breakage. If it's basically just sitting on the surface, on a concrete surface or a patio or something, for example, the freeze-thaw differential between this ground surface and the container itself frequently leads to cracking and breaking. So yeah, if you get a nice glazed pot that is rated as frost resistant, you know, outdoor use, so I mean, you do want to start with the right pot. I'm a big believer of putting little pot feet. Just I use these things, the little plastic ones that just elevate it right only about maybe half an inch off the ground. If you take those couple little precautions, they go through the winter pretty well.
Wonderful. All right, so next one, I don't know how many you want to do right now before we continue on, but
We'll go with as many questions as we have for now.
okay. All right. Well, I got 9 right now. So next is, what native perennials would work under a maple tree where the roots of the tree are above the ground, and would mulch be able to put over the roots if you do that?
Yeah, I find that a really, really difficult area to garden in because there is so much root competition and everything. I just know, and again, my own experience, you know, as the trees mature, it gets to where it's just really hard to be able to do much of anything. So you might have to go a little further out from the tree. Now I am okay putting a thin, just a light layer of topsoil or mulch over the root zone of a tree. Like I said, I've worked many, many years as an arborist. I'm well aware of the damage that soil can do covering tree roots, and we never want to actually pile it up against the trunk or the root collar that's in there. But if we're talking about 1 or 2 inches of just loose topsoil or something, we might be able to get something like that going. Oddly enough, I've had some good success with Iris cristata. It just runs by a little shallow kind of rhizome, so it doesn't need a lot of soil. And as long as it gets maybe a few hours of sunlight, it holds up there pretty well, gives you nice blooms in spring, though it does kind of fizzle out by late summer. It's not necessarily evergreen. I'm trying to think a little bit. There's another ground cover called Chrysogonum virginium or virginiana. It's or green and gold. Again, my concern is the moisture requirement, because if you do have this root competition, it can be it will dry out on you to have to pay a little extra attention to the watering on that. And I think that's a lot of the others, you know, if you think about even things like our native Pachysandra, some of the geraniums, you know, there's other things that grow there, but it's really the moisture competition. Now the barren wort that I showed in there, the Epimedium, that's a very, very, it will tolerate dry shade. That's one of the reasons I use it so extensively, but I don't believe that's a native species, but it's certainly one that you might want to think about. And again, always go to the Plant Nova Natives group, their website, because things I can't keep on the top of my head, you know, they probably have some other good ideas for you.
Okie dokie. All right, next question is someone wants to plant 3 sedums in their front yard along with hostas. How far apart should they plant the sedums?
Well, both hosta and sedum can get some pretty good size to it. Be a little tentative to the lighting. You know, sedum is, again, a little surprisingly shade tolerant, so you can plant those together, but sedum generally is going to do better. It gets a little more sun than the hosta does. Again, this can depend a lot on the varieties. I'll tell you, I'm becoming a huge sedum fan. I'm moving more and more planting sedum all over my garden because it's so easy, it's so durable, and I'm tired of fussing around with some other things. So some of the ground cover type sedums, I'll usually plant those about 12 inches apart. The sedum, like I was showing you in the picture, you know, those get larger mounded. You know, they'll get easily 18, maybe even 24 inches tall and wide. But again, you can manage that by pruning. You know, your hosta, again, I'd like to give things room to grow. So I figure I'm going to be giving them at least 12 inches and maybe even up to 24 inches between plants. So just thinking through this with you, I'm going to say anywhere from 12 to 24 inches apart are the sort of the two extremes, are probably going to land right in the middle there, let's say like anywhere from 18 to 24 inches, and give that about 3 years, and you should have a solid, dense 100% coverage. I like to give things a time. I'm not into the instant look. Good question.
Well, we have another sedum question right after that, which is it too late right now to prune sedum?
No, I did that sedum I was showing you. I did that last night.
All right.
So, I would say by mid-June, that I think maybe we're getting, sort of late in the game for that, but try to get to it right away.
All right, and then segueing into another pruning question is when/how do you prune grasses like, and I'm going to butcher this, Atolia or lemongrass? And that's Auteola.
That grass, that Atolia, I don't know that grass, so I can't really answer that one. Lemongrass, generally it's not winter hardy for us. That's grown more as I say perennial herb, but its winter hardiness is a little tricky. So it essentially grows during the summer months. I guess it could be pruned back in the winter, but I don't really expect it to survive.
Okay. All right. Well, the next question after that is a customer has a dwarf Alberta spruce in a planter with some annuals planted around the perimeter. Can they add weekly water-soluble fertilizer to the annuals without harming the spruce?
I would probably try to find a middle ground, because that's a lot of fertilizer put on a dwarf spruce. The more you fertilize, the more it wants to grow. And obviously that's a slow growing variety. So maybe we could settle somewhere in between, go like doing a water soluble fertilizer like once every 4 to 6 weeks. But I think if you do that weekly, your annuals will be loving you, but your spruce may not. So we'll just have to kind of find a compromise on that one.
Okay. Next question is, does Merrifield sell various varieties of Haconocloa grass?
Oh, right now we got a great selection that's out there. I don't even know all the different names, but again, that's a group of plants that's like exploded in terms of all the different color variations, or some that even take on different hues in the fall. So there's just been, again, an explosion of those. Now that's that grass spreads by rhizome, but it's kind of slow. It likes a sort of part sun, shade, moist soil conditions. And if you buy, let's say in a quart-sized pot, it will take at least a year, maybe even 2, for that to double. So like when some of these pictures I was showing you, those are plantings that probably went in like 10 years ago, and it's taken time to develop to that. But it's a fabulous grass. And I leave it up through the winter time. It goes dormant in the winter time. Trim it back in spring. So very, very low maintenance. Just trim it back once in the spring. And after that, no pest problems, no issues at all with it.
All right, wonderful. Next question is, customer is wondering about if we have any tips on how to move Blatilla striatia.
Yeah, again, that moves super easy. It does spread by a rhizome. I would rather do that while it's dormant. It's flowering right now. So when I say while it's dormant, we're either going to do that in the fall as its foliage is starting to yellow and wither. To me, would be the best time, or you want to catch it in very early spring as soon as you see it coming up. But I would prefer to just leave it alone through the rest of the summer. But it moves real easily. Just that little bit you saw in there was a clump that one of the customers shared with me, stuck in the yard and took hold, and it continues to spread.
All righty. All right. Next question. Customers wondering about if you need to change the potting soil every year in those containers that had the perennials in them.
Oh, no, you don't. Potting soil, it may be something that you want to really do a complete change. I mean, that might be like a 5-year time frame or something. But normally we just might replenish it a little bit, because you do change plants. I mean, plants die. they're to keep them seasonal, like you might have seen that first one where Linda, they planted a little begonia in there. So there had been some pansies that came out, you know, when things started to warm up, begonia went in. So anytime I am replanting, I like to refresh it, you know, add a little bit of fresh potting mix in there. But no, it can stay in that container for years. And because some of those actually have little shrubs and things in it, we've got some that have been going for many, many years. And, you know, we again might do a freshen up, but we never had to do like a complete renovation on it.
Okay. Wonderful. Thanks for all those questions. Still a couple more to go. Next one is, or did you want to continue on, David?
I'm kind of watching our time here a little bit. Let me just change gears a little bit and talk to you guys, because I always bring like a little tidbit sort of, I think, what has been going on at the clinic, what little pests and problems and things are out there that I want to give you a reminder on. So let's see if I can go through this just real quickly. Because I look back since I last talked to you over the last couple of weeks, and I'm thinking, what is going on at the clinic? And what's going on in the clinic is basically I see all kinds of problems and issues going on with water. So this is like, to me, the most basic, fundamental part of gardening, and it's also the most challenging and difficult concept to get through to explain. And it's fantastic, all the new gardeners we have, but just getting watering right is a huge thing for us. So I found this little illustration on the web and try to imagine the soil is like this big sponge. And when that sponge is completely full, this is to represent a fully 100% saturated soil condition. Each little drop of rain that falls trickles down. The soil cannot hold another drop of soil and it falls out. So this is 100% full saturation. The ground can't accept any more water. This picture is the other extreme. There's a little film of water around each of the soil particles, but it is bound to the soil. The pull, the capillary action, the pull of the soil to that water, this is not available to the plants. This is completely, I'm saying basically dry soil. There is no moisture available. What we talk about, the wilting point where our plants begin to wilt and falter. The happy place, of course, is right in between, what we refer to as field capacity, where all the pore space is between the soil particles, and it's really the pore space, the porosity, that holds the water, holds the minerals in solution the plant needs. Now, the thing is, plants need water, they need minerals, but they also need oxygen. The roots need air to breathe. So if our soil remains saturated like this, and it remains saturated at that full capacity, there's no respiration that can take place in the roots. The roots literally suffocate and die. So it seems like we always are going from one extreme to the other. And we just have this difficult time finding the middle ground that's in there. So what we try to advise you, the way we really have found, and I've feel like my whole career just talking about watering and examining and studying this. Watering a new plant, watering new plants is very different from an existing garden, because when you put a new tree or shrub in, like we're illustrating here, the roots are all contained inside this root ball. It's not like we talked about existing trees like your maple tree that has those roots expanding and spreading everywhere. When you have an established plant with an extensive root system and we get rainfall like we recently did, those trees and plants actually can access that water and utilize it, and it's a tremendous benefit to them. On a new tree or new plant, and this doesn't matter whether it's an annual, a tree, or a shrub, it has this little small root system. It may be raining out in your garden, but this doesn't have the capacity, that root system, to benefit from it all. And we have to water directly on that root ball. It's just imperative that that root ball is not allowed to go completely dry. and it cannot stay completely 100% saturated. So we ask that you really check the soil. You cannot tell by looking at the plant. If a plant is dry, leaves wilt, yellow, and shed. If a plant is drowning, plants, leaves yellow, wilt, and die. So you can't tell by looking. We ask that you actually, if you have any question in your mind, you dig down beside that root ball, 4 or 5 inches into the ground and actually feel the soil. So when that root ball begins to feel dry, we saturate it. We make sure that that root ball is thoroughly soaked right on that root ball, but we don't water it again until it starts to feel slightly dry. Now, this might seem intuitive or common sense, but I can't tell you how many times and how many things we see going wrong with plants that are drying out. And they're drying out because people think that it's water, this rain. I was emphasized because we're seeing at the clinic when I was out working my garden last night, even after all this rain, when I got about 2 inches down into the soil, it was completely dry. So that's my little message was, please, just if you're unsure, just pick up a hand trowel, dig down there a few inches, and quit guessing about it only takes a minute. You dig down in there, you feel the soil, and then you know what's going on and can water appropriately. So that was my little soapbox here to wrap things up, and we've got time for a couple more questions if we've got a few more, Danny.
All right, sounds good. Let's see, the next question we have is there a secret or do you have any tips for keeping heucheras alive?
So one is they do great in containers. I think that the moisture thing, like we talked about, the moisture in the soil is what the real secret is. Again, knock on wood here. I've had some go into my garden for 8-9 years and still looking good. But I think it's good soil preparation because we need that drainage. Our clay soil tends to not drain sufficiently. So mix a lot of compost, a lot of organic matter in there so that we can try to find that moist but well-drained condition. That's a little tricky thing. I will also say there's so many varieties. Early on, I'm going back maybe 15, 20 years, a lot of the varieties that were being introduced were developed out in the Pacific Northwest, were not real heat and humid tolerant. And so in our climate, they were struggling through the summertime. But some of the newer varieties have improved heat and drought tolerance. So one is just really work on your soil, keep them out of the full sun. They will burn up in full sun, keep a little shade on them because we do want to try to keep the temperatures cool. If you're not successful with that, try them in containers because with good, moist but well-drained soil, they can really thrive.
All right. Next question is from a customer that is wondering how to, he has some sedum that was planted decades ago. And he was wondering if there is any way any tips about refreshing the plant, or is there a certain quote unquote expiration date for an older plant like that?
Now, one thing I'll tell you is, or maybe I shouldn't because we're trying to sell plants to you, but sedum is one of the easiest things in the world to propagate. If we're talking about those trailing creeping types, what the commercial growers will do, they'll take clippings and literally just a tray of soil, throw them on top of the soil, keep it under a mist system so that it stays moist, and those clippings will root right into the surface of the soil. So you can always, if plants are kind of getting tired, worn out, I know like that, you can, one is to take cuttings and just rejuvenate the plant with some new, start some new plants. They do also respond, like I said, to pruning, as I was showing on there, because they will get leggy sometimes, and you can prune them back and then they will increase their density that's in there. So again, I'm finding sedum to be very sturdy, long lasting. I now have about 4 different varieties in my garden. I keep adding more, but I've seen where, like I said, the trailing ones go out where all the growth is at the tips and there's nothing left in the center. You can try just pruning that out, or like I said, propagating cuttings and replant into there. But you should get many years out of them.
All right, well, let's do one more question because we are right at the 45-minute spot. This time does go by so quickly. But you were talking, when you were talking about the watering with a new plant, how long would you classify a plant as quote unquote new?
Excellent question. So the easiest way for me to answer that is to use trees as an example. Now, again, we're talking about perennials, but a tree, or our rule of thumb is if you have a 1-inch caliper trunk like this on the tree, that's going to take 1 year to get established. A 2-inch caliper, 2 years. A 3-inch caliper, 3 years. So that would mean, as an example, when I say established, that's when it resumes its normal growth rate. So a big tree that's got a 3-inch caliper, that can be a 3-year process. So during that time period, you really have to be attentive to the watering, not just the first summer, but the second and the third summer that goes on. Now, it improves over time. If, let's say, my first summer, I'm watering, it might be once every 7 or 10 days or something like that. And the next summer, maybe I'm only going to water it once every 10 or 14 days. And by the third summer, maybe it's only if I've gone for a prolonged drought period. But it's not really ready to go on its own until sometimes a number of years. Little plants like annuals and perennials and some of the stuff we're talking about, you just got to watch the watering on those kind of through the whole season, but they usually have their roots established, within that first growing season. So if you planted them in spring, the perennials like we're talking about, if you plant them in spring, by that fall, they're pretty well established.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you for all that information, David. Just to reiterate to anybody who showed up late or didn't have their questions answered, we did record this session today. So if you would like a link to the video, or if you have any questions that you had that did not get answered today by David, you can also email us, email Sally Burrows at sburrows@mgcmail.com, or you can also reach out to us on our website, the contact us form on our website at www.merryfieldgardencenter.com. I'll actually get those emails, and we can get those questions answered for you. We can also provide you with the link. David also talked about a plant list that Linda's working on for her the video that she did, and if you're interested in getting that plant list, also send us an email either to Sally or to me from our website. David, do you have anything else?
Just going to say, I've been doing too many of these programs on flowers and prettiness and beautiness, and I decided I'm going back to my comfort zone. And the next time we meet, we're going to get down into the ugly side of gardening, which is really my forte. And I want to talk about what I'm going to call kind of garden spoilers, really focus more on diseases, because by mid-June, that's when all of your, that's when things start going wrong. That's when the different leaf spots and molds and mildew and all those things show up. So it's not going to be uplifting, but it's going to be important. So I hope you'll join us for that program as well.
All right. Well, thanks, David. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. This concludes our virtual plant clinic for the day. Have a good day, everyone.